Good morning. Today I'm going to share a story with you from Godly Play, which is a sample of what our kids have been learning, our younger kids have been learning in Sunday school this year. This story from Godly Play is called Faces of Easter. In the beginning, the baby was born. God chose Mary to be the mother of God. Listen carefully. God chose Mary to be the mother of God, and the Word was born a wordless child. When the baby looked up to its mother's Mary's face, the cross was already there. When he looked up to his father's face, the cross was there too. Mary and Joseph held the baby close. They kept him warm, and they gave him everything he needed to grow. The baby grew and became a boy. When Jesus was 12, he and his mother and father and many people from their village of Nazareth went into the great city of Jerusalem. They went in to celebrate a high holy day. After the celebration was over, all the people from Nazareth went through the high gates, and they continued on their way back home. After some time, Mary and Joseph noticed that Jesus wasn't there. They thought he was playing with some friends and walking behind. Mary and Joseph turned back towards Jerusalem and went through all of the dark and narrow streets looking for Jesus. He wasn't anywhere to be found. Finally, they came to the temple, and there he was. Jesus was talking to the rabbis, the priests. When he spoke, they listened. And when they spoke, he listened, because he wanted to learn so much more. Then Mary and Joseph said to Jesus, "Why did you do this?" And Jesus said, "How could you not know I would be in my Father's house?" Mary and Joseph didn't understand because their home was in Nazareth. Anyway, even though they didn't understand, they did not forget. Jesus grew and became a man, and when Jesus was about 30, Jesus went down to the river Jordan to visit his cousin John. John was baptizing people. Jesus waded through the water, and when he came face to face with John, John looked at him as if it were the first time, and John said, "You are the one. You are the Messiah. You are the one that everyone has been waiting for. You must baptize me." And Jesus said, "No, you must come before me. Prepare the way. It is written that way. Baptize me." Jesus went down into the darkness and the chaos of the water, and then John lifted him up into the light. And people who were there saw a light from heaven, and they saw a dove come down close to Jesus. They also heard a voice, and that voice said, "This is my son, with whom I am well pleased." After Jesus was baptized, he continued on across the river Jordan to learn more about who he really was and what his work was to be. Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. There was very little to eat and little to drink. Jesus heard a voice, and the voice said, "Why don't you turn those stones over there into bread and have something to eat?" And Jesus said, "No, to be fully human, we need much more than bread to eat." Then it was as if Jesus was on top of the high temples in Jerusalem, and the voice came back, and the voice said, "Go ahead, jump. If you're really the Son of God, the angels will come catch you before you come crashing on the rocks." And Jesus said, "No need to test God." And then it was as if Jesus could see all over the kingdoms of the world. The voice came back and said, "If you follow me, I will make you king of all of these kingdoms." And Jesus said, "No. I will be king, but I will not be that kind of king." The voice left. Jesus crossed back over the river Jordan to begin his work. But what was his work? Jesus' work was to come close to people. Look, you can see here, Jesus was touching the blind man's eyes. When Jesus came close to people, they could see things that they've never seen before. They could do things they've never done before. They became well. Jesus also told parables. He knew that he was about to become a parable. Jesus went to Jerusalem for one last time. Jesus went into Jerusalem one last time on a Sunday. It was the time of Passover, and there were many people from many different lands celebrating Passover, and they thought Jesus was coming in to be their king, but they weren't paying attention. Jesus did not come into Jerusalem on some big white horse. He did not come in carried by a big army. Jesus came into Jerusalem on a donkey, and it wasn't even his. He borrowed it. Still, on that Sunday, people waved palm branches. That's what they did for kings. On that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Jesus taught in the temple. The temple guard said on that Thursday, we will come take Jesus. On Thursday, the temple guards went to look for Jesus. They couldn't find Jesus. He was running through the streets with the 12 disciples, and they came to a house that had an upper room. Jesus and the 12 ran through the house, up the stairs, up to the upper room, and they shared their Last Supper together. After everybody had everything they wanted to eat, Jesus did something strange. Jesus took the bread, he raised it up, gave thanks to God for the bread, then he shared it with the 12. And he said, when you share bread like this, I will be there. Then he took a cup of wine. He gave thanks to God for the wine. He shared it with the 12. And then he said, when you share wine like this, I will be there. Judas suddenly got up from the table and disappeared. The rest sang a hymn. After they were done singing, they went down to the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus wanted to pray. After Jesus prayed, he went back to look for the 12. Suddenly, Judas came out of the darkness and greeted Jesus. That was the signal for the temple guards to come take Jesus away, which they did into the darkness. And the 12 disappeared into the darkness. That night was a confusing one. That next morning, Jesus was taken outside the walls of Jerusalem, and he was crucified on the cross. That afternoon, Jesus died on the cross. The skies became dark. Then Jesus' body was taken, and it was buried. It was taken to a tomb where there was a great stone that covered the tomb like a door. That Saturday, it was so quiet, you could almost hear the earth breathe. On Sunday, it was the women who had the courage to go back to the tomb. Even though Jesus died, it was very sad. They wanted to be close to Jesus. They wanted to remember him. Well, when they got to the tomb, the great stone had been moved and Jesus was gone. But somehow, Jesus was still with them on that Sunday, as Jesus is with us today through the bread and the wine. And that is cause for great celebration. That is Easter. The colors change. But it's important to remember that without the joy of Easter, we cannot have the sadness of the crucifixion. And without the sadness of the crucifixion, we cannot have the joy of Easter. And that is the mystery of Easter.
The mystery of Easter continues every time that we read Scripture, and so this is the story that we read from the Gospel of Luke. Jesus was there, and a lawyer approached him and asked him a question. He wanted to challenge him, and he said, "What do I do to receive eternal life?" And Jesus replied, "Well, what have you read? What have you read in the Scriptures? What do you find there?" And the man said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said, "Yes, you are right. Do these things, and you will live." But the man, the lawyer, wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus another question. He said, "But who is my neighbor?" And so Jesus replied, "There once was a man who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance, a priest came by, and when he came upon the place where the man was laying, he walked on the other side of the road. And in the same way, a Levite, one of the religious leaders, came by on the same road, and when he came to the place where the man lay, he also walked to the other side of the road. But then a Samaritan came by, and the Samaritan, coming upon that place, saw the man and had pity on him, and went to him and bandaged his wounds, and poured oil and wine on them to heal them. And he helped the man up and placed him on his own animal, and took him to an inn and took care of him. The next morning, the Samaritan took 2 denarii out of his pocket and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of this man. And if you spend any more money in the meantime, when I return, I will repay you." And so Jesus asked the lawyer, "Which of these men was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" And the lawyer replied, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said, "Go and do likewise."
So, this is the first year that we've done this Word for All Ages, where we talk a little bit about what's going on here in the church, and then most of the kids walk out and leave. And you might have wondered, I think, what we are up to when we leave the service here on Sunday morning. And so I thought that I would take a couple minutes here just to fill you in a little bit on that. You saw Anne Faurot do one of her Godly Play stories. That is what our younger children do. They go with Anne and hear one of those stories. The 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders come with me, and we talk about stories. We basically go into the Schmidt Chapel, sit down on the stairs, in the pews, wherever we are comfortable, and we talk about a Bible story that I've chosen for that particular Sunday. Well, we read through it, we talk about it, we read through it maybe again, and then I've got like a little opening question that I use to get the kids started and get our discussion rolling. What I've really loved about this format is that we can just sit down. There's usually a small group of us, and we have a nice little discussion about these passages, learning each other's viewpoints, maybe challenging each other a little bit, and I think it's worked out pretty well. Now, Pastor Katie just recited the parable of the Good Samaritan. It is Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. There's Bibles here in your pews if you want to look it up. So, here's my opening question, one for all of you to ponder while we listen to the Rejoice Choir sing. And it's to think about this parable and think about who you relate to most in this parable. Now, you can't just say who you relate to and leave it at that. I would then challenge you to say why you think that is true. So give that some thought.